Welcome to Sport Media and Tech. I am Keel Blake. On this episode, Dr. Jeff Porter, Mark Hodgkin, and I spend time with Jason Smith and Creed Mangrum of Sponsor CX talking about innovation in the industry, how sponsorships are changing, evolving with the times, digital media, and some of the impact that COVID-19 has had. Stay tuned for more.
How did you get your start in sport media and tech?
My first job really with sports media and tech was a company I started called Perfect Record Sports. That I started with a friend that I met when I was in Boston, and he had worked doing game contracts for Harvard University and all of their athletics, and he hated dealing with all these paper contracts that exist in college sports. So I built him a platform to help aid colleges and universities to exchange paper contract, to get rid of paper contracts and to go to everything online and through email and electronic signatures for everything. And it's kind of turned into a good platform for people to just manage their schedules in general for all of their games. And then my introduction to sponsorships came from Jason. So we met a couple of years ago, and he presented to me the vision of what he has for Sponsor CX. And I've grown up playing sports and was involved in sports, played baseball in college. And so when he told me what he had in mind and what the opportunity was, I kind of had to jump on board.
No, I appreciate that, Creed. Yeah, my background is I went to school grew up in Portland, Oregon, and then came to played football for a small junior college in eastern Idaho for a few years, and then transferred down to Brigham Young University down in Provo, Utah. Got my degree in advertising communications, and while I was at BYU, I was interning for the Utah Jazz at the time, and that's back during the John Stockton, Karl Malone days, and got a really great experience of how game operations worked and how sponsorship worked into the whole game ops side of it, and really fell in love with advertising and sports together, and that kind of started my career. And to save you from some other stories, I ended up working full time for the Jazz. A sponsorship sales position opened up, probably a year out of college, and it was the relationships that I'd built there that really got me that job, because I was super young and all the other guys I was working with were a lot older than me, and so was able to learn there for a few years. And then my some good friends of mine who worked for ISP Sports at the time, they were later purchased by IMG College. They had just taken over the rights to BYU athletics, and they asked me to come down and kind of help with that, and it was a great opportunity. So I came down and was with BYU IMG for about 7 years or so, and then one of my what was great about that is we started at about $600,000 in sponsorship annual revenue then. And by my 7 years or so, we had grown it to almost 10 million a year in sponsorship revenue, which was pretty fun to be a part of. And so at that point, I was able to see how, from a property standpoint, working with brands, how challenging it was to be able to fulfill and manage the sponsorship side of the business there. And then after my time at IMG, one of my clients was Mountain America Credit Union, and they were wanting to have someone come in and oversee their entire region, sponsorship for the region, and manage those on the brand side. And so I was able to spend a lot of time, working with the Boise States and BYU and Utah Jazz. I was able to see all the different properties and how they managed the credit union sponsorships, and I saw a huge disconnect from notepads to Excel spreadsheets to Google Sheets to different types of systems, but there was no real transparency. It was super hard to manage it all. We're trying to approve things through WeTransfer and trying to manage everything through our emails. It was a challenge, and still is, right, to this day. And so my sales experience, being able to see the disconnect on that side, on the property side, and then my unique experience of being on the brand side is kind of where it all kind of came to fruition for me to say, hey, there just needs to be a better way for both the brands and the properties to be able to collaborate on their sponsorships. And I always say the easy part is going to a lunch meeting and talk about all the great things that you're going to be able to do. And then once the contract gets signed, that's where the real work happens, right? And so I had mapped out this mapped out Sponsor CX, and kind of I took a PowerPoint and kind of put it all together of what I felt like it would look like, and I invested my own money and had it built, and that's, we started to do some validations and things, and so currently the product is a post contract software to manage the sponsorships there, but we've now started the process, and I can let Creed talk a little bit more about this, but to integrate the whole sponsorship experience from a CRM standpoint at managing I found a prospect, all the way to I'm going to create an agreement and I want to manage my inventory I have to sell, all the way into the current system, which is the fulfillment of sponsorships. And so it's been super fun to work on, and that's kind of how I got my start into this.
Yeah, no, great stuff. I'd like to go a little bit deeper into the Sponsor CX and what you both do there. So could you talk a little bit about, maybe a little bit more detail about what the goal of the company is, and then what you both do at Sponsor CX?
So Jason is the visionary. He sees it all, what this really is going to be and what it can be. I am the builder and the architect. I love writing code and building software, and so it's been really fun to work with Jason because in past relationships I've had, it's more dictated to what should be built, and working with Jason has been awesome because I feel like he treats me as an equal partner in coming up with the right solutions. I feel like I've gotten some good experience in building simple user interfaces and simple designs, and even just how we can solve problems maybe differently than they're currently solved. And Jason is always super open and super willing to talk about anything and different ways to maybe solve a problem we've been looking at. And I think, right now it's in that post-contract fulfillment stage. But I think we really, within that CRM and inventory management, we're really doing some interesting and cool things that nobody else does. We're really going to give people current and exact insights into what inventory they have available to sell at any given time. We're going to provide really accurate insights into what inventory performed the best, and where you get the best bang for your buck. And and eventually, right now we're focused on this property side and making it really easy for properties to show their sponsors the value that they're giving them. But we're going to be adding in a sponsorship side so they can, manage the sponsorship agreement from their side and be able to see and access all that really good information, so that they can see the value they're getting back. And then I think eventually this turns into a really excellent opportunity for marketplace, for people that have shown that they can be really good receivers of sponsorship and they provide a lot of value. They can have a lot more access to newer sponsorships, and the flip side, that sponsors can find properties who will represent their brand well and fit well with their mission, and can really just bolster and grow these organizations within sports and outside of sports. Anyone that needs sponsorship will have some good access.
And I can't say it any better than what Creed did there. But as far as my role, I mean, and I appreciate the kind words of Creed. I mean, he as he mentioned, a couple of years ago is when we got introduced to each other and working on it. He's architecting this extension of the CRM and the inventory management piece into the current software that we've got. But I look at him he may not have been there right as I created that first one where I kind of out of my own pocket, had this first version, created. But I look at him as a founder of the company. I mean, he's architecting this massive project. And just as, with technology, it's a living, breathing animal. There's so many things that happen with it. And even and I always catch myself, I'm like, okay, Creed, when we get to this, we'll be finished, right? But we're not really finished ever, right? It's like you get it to where you feel comfortable, but then as you listen to customer feedback, obviously then you make some iterations and changes. And so it's like creating this organism, right? That's just going to continue to grow and evolve.
I'm so excited to have you guys on because the world of sponsorship is changing, and it's changing rapidly, right? From the name, image, and likeness, from college athletics to conversations with athletes about their branding. There's tons of things that are happening. And so I want to hear from you guys, what do you think is actually driving change in the sports sponsorship landscape right now?
Well, first of all, I think that technology, like the sponsorship industry, is totally underserved with technology. Number one, there's an opportunity there, and any tech that is in the sponsorship industry is it's not serving everything that's needed there too. And so there is a lot of opportunity there. I mean, obviously the fan experience at sporting events, our devices in venue make are creating, some of that change from a technology standpoint, but and that can create more sponsorship opportunities that way. And you're seeing some tech companies out there that help with that, like Squad, for example. There's a lot of tech out there that will help interact with fans at these venues, which create more sponsorship opportunity. But I think that brands are analyzing sponsorships deeper now, in two ways. One, am I getting what I actually bought? Am I getting what I'm actually receiving? Number one, and number two, how am I analyzing the data? And how can we look at the data to make better buying decisions, or how can we look at the data to look at to change our messaging too, and what we want to do there. So having data on both sides too, data from the property and data from the brand. And if you're able to kind of combine a lot of that information, there's some really interesting analytical information that you can create there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, Jeff, that's an awesome question. And I think, just the advances in all technologies are really just making it such a different game, right? It's not like throw a sign up and that's like your thing now. I mean, even for individuals, you have sponsors. College athletes are going to be able to do all of that stuff. And like
Absolutely.
now you got TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and all these different avenues for people to represent a brand, to represent something for sponsorship they're receiving. And there's really nothing great. I mean, podcasts have sponsors. They don't have anything great to manage their sponsorships. Nobody has anything where they can kind of pull all this information across all these different channels into one place and really see like what they're getting. And I feel like that's one place we're going, and we're going quick, is we're going to make it so, me as a property, if I'm my own property, I can log in and see that, I have these agreements with these different companies, and I can show them like, hey, like this is how much engagement I got from this Instagram post or this TikTok video that I made. And like, you'll be able to show everyone like what you can do and what value you can provide. And I think that's where we're going to get in the industry, and hopefully we get there at Sponsor CX, but it's really just providing a platform for properties to really show what they offer through attendance statistics, eyeballs on, marketing ads on Facebook, just all these different places, be able to pull things in and really make it so this is your one stop. This is where you can create a profile that shows the value you can add, the value you can give. And so sponsors can see like, oh, I want to be working with this person. They represent my vision. and look at all the eyes that I get and all the engagement that I get from me sponsoring this individual or this brand or this property or whatever.
All impressions aren't created equal too, right? So from a digital interaction that I can have with someone on my device is going to be different than, that's a different impression than if I'm driving on a interstate and I pass the big stadium with the name on it and I glance up and I just see Allegiant Stadium in Vegas, right? Like those are two different types of impressions. Which one are you going to have? Which one's more valuable, right? Now, you could argue one versus the other. See, for me, I'm going to argue that the one that I can have a little bit more one-on-one interaction with is going to be more valuable. So I'm going to analyze this asset a lot different than I'm going to analyze the Allegiant Stadium that I saw that I drove by. It doesn't mean that that naming right's not valuable. It's super valuable. You're going to have probably way more impressions on that, which makes that quote unquote more valuable, right? Because, but the cost ratio associated with that one's going to be different than this one that I have too. And so that's another thinking that brands have got to look at it is how do I evaluate my sponsorships? You know, you can have a big $2 million, you know, per year partnership with the Vegas Raiders, and I might evaluate my digital asset differently than, you know, like a naming right piece, just because it's a different one. But the naming right piece probably is going to cost more money on that valuation because there's just naturally more eyeballs that are going to be seeing it. So it's just a different way to think about it. And when brands evaluate sponsorships, they're going to have to do that a little bit more and evaluate in a different way.
You've both just described this, but there's been such an evolution from, you know, sponsorship really being these specific assets. You come in and partner, and here's where we're going to put your logo. And, you know, we're hoping that that logo is going to either show up, you know, back in the day in the newspaper during, you know, the announcement of the score in the championship, or, you know, let's fast forward a little bit to, it's going to be on the sideboard on TV. So you're getting that broadcast value and all that ancillary media around that. And now let's fast forward to today. And what started with just sponsorship being a logo and getting your logo and name recognition out there has now transitioned to measurable immersive experiences. So, you know, there's a school of thought today, and it's called the one-to-one rule. So I'm curious of what you think about the one-to-one rule. And that is the rule in which, you know, for every dollar that you spend in sponsorship, you're going to spend another dollar to activate that sponsorship.
So I'm not really a big believer in it. I don't think if you have $1 million sponsorship, I don't think you necessarily have to have $1 million to activate that partnership. To me, it's inefficient. I look at it, you know, from the standpoint of looking at a few things. One, looking at the resources that you do have to use internally from a brand standpoint of what you can use. Now you do need to factor in people's salaries and things like that are working on the partnership. So that's another piece that could potentially get you up there depending on how big your teams are. But like, I don't think I need to necessarily buy $1 million worth of video content and $1 million worth of promo items and all those things to help activate. I think you just look at it and you look at what is needed. So when you actually negotiate the deal and you outline the deal, you have to look at what is needed to be able to activate that efficiently and effectively. And I also feel like technology can serve in that factor to help that be more efficient as well. So, I mean, you do have companies, and I'll give them a pub here today too, like Sponsor United, for example. I know Bob Lynch well, the CEO of Sponsor United, and that platform gives insights into other brands and what they're doing to activate, right? So you can now look at other things and say, hey, let's just use a financial institution, for example. Like if you're looking to put a promotion together or whatever it may be to help drive traffic, you could look and use technology like Sponsor United or others to look at it and see what else is going on in the industry and financial institutions, to look at it and say, here's where I need to spend my money to activate it. Here's where we can be more efficient with our dollars. So I don't think there necessarily has to be a $1 for every $1 spent. But I do know some people who do think that way. It makes for very large budgets, that's for sure, if you do it that way.
Yeah, I think just from my perspective, from what I've seen in a lot of different things, is that the things that bring it closer to a one-to-one is just inefficiencies in the system. And I think the main thing we're trying to do with Sponsor CX is just remove inefficiencies in the system. You know, Jason was talking earlier about how hard it is to just manage communication, just like from emails, and like there's information and attachments and old versions of attachments and images and stuff like all over the place. You don't know what the most recent is. You don't know what you need to do and what you need to act on. And, you know, those inefficiencies are really what drive up cost, whether it's paying for more people or paying for mistakes you make or whatever. You know, those are the things we're really trying to eliminate, is just making a simple way for, you know, people to communicate, people to stay up to date on what needs to be done, what tasks are most important, what is the most up-to-date artwork for a logo or for a sign, and have everyone approve and know that this is the thing that needs to be done, and then be able to show, you know, real time, like this is what happened, this is how I fulfilled on it, and then the people can see that it was there and it was done. You know, removing a lot of these inefficiencies in the steps and making it easier for people to just really stay up and stay on top of those things. I think that will make it a much more favorable rule than a one-to-one rule for people that decide to use Sponsor CX.
And you can almost see it as a competitive advantage for those brands and organizations that, you know, are more organized and are showing that value and have, you know, are facilitating technology like yours to deliver that sponsorship value in a way where it costs their organization less to activate in that way. So, you know, I'd say today it could be a competitive advantage when you look at two different opportunities. Say, oh, it's going to cost our brand more to actually get ROI on this partner versus working with this one, because they're providing, you know, this experience really for us just to plug our brand into and hit go.
And that's why Sponsor CX is key, you know, and there are lots of different technologies you can use to help with efficiency, but it's when you're having to bounce from Excel spreadsheets to WeTransfers to manage your emails to Google Sheets and all of that. I mean, really, now you're starting to talk about like just human capital too, like the time that's spent to manage all of that. You can really reduce that down and really become super efficient. And that's a big vision of Sponsor CX. And we don't necessarily want to just serve the sports industry. And we know the sports industry makes up 70% of all sponsorships, but there's a super underserved market in the 30%, which is your arts, events, entertainment, your nonprofits that actually have sponsorships too, that there's really nothing to help them and to serve them from those who do $150,000 a year in sponsorships annually, smaller organizations, all the way up to 100 million a year, right? And so we want to be a solution that can help people be efficient, help people manage the sponsorships effectively, but at all levels, from your big properties all the way to the smaller ones too.
One of the things I think seems to be changing in the marketplace is a greater emphasis on the fan finding value in sponsorship, right? We might have used to talk about this as finding a win for the brand, finding a win for the team, but I think maybe the fan has entered that equation. So to kind of channel a little Michael Scott from The Office, how do you get a win-win-win situation?
Well, I think I mean, from a property standpoint, they're going to win because they get sponsorship dollars, number one, right? But they also get potentially some reputable brands to partner with, and this kind of goes with the brand too, and the brand side of their win. But you get a brand is going to partner with a property, and they get a reputable mark as well. So both can benefit off of each other's reputation. And I think that's a big piece of it and what you do in the community that way. And when you have two reputable brands that come together, there becomes actionable things that take place that you can do within the community. And I think that's an important piece to it. The fan obviously will benefit because sponsorship creates engagement, right? And so an engagement creates happy fans. They want to engage with their the team that they're a fan of. And so it's a little bit harder for a team to just create that content when it's not sponsored, because a lot of times the sponsorship creates that content because it pays for it, number one, and number two, it also just creates more ways to help drive business for the brand, and that's another win for the brand as well, where they can receive, drive some actionable business for them as well through the sponsorships. But and it creates some opportunities outside of the event for the fan as well too. For them to be able to take advantage of certain promotions or offers from that brand. So it creates engagement, but it also helps give them opportunities to receive benefits outside of the game experience.
Yeah, I love any time we can get an office joke or reference. My name's Creed, so that's kind of my de facto. Any GIF I use or anything I can use or meme is always pretty office related. So anytime we can get one of those in there, I appreciate that. I lived in New England for a while, and there was always these, like, when the Pats won, you'd get like a free donut at Dunkin' Donuts, or like when the Red Sox won, kids eat free at like Friendly's or something. But there was never anything more frustrating when, like, I'd kind of forget about that, and then like the Pats would win, and then it'd be like Monday would end, and I'd be like hear on the radio or it's like Tuesday, and it's like, Pats win, like you get a free donut, and I'd be like, it's like a day late. And I think when you add really good communication and good technology, you can make sure that you're not hearing an ad or like some sort of plug for something that was in the sponsorship agreement after I could take advantage of it. So I think a lot of things are timing, and when communication isn't efficient and behind, I think there's very short windows of when the timing is right. And I think when you're up on communication, and when you have everything planned and set up like you want it to be, you can hit your timing right. And timing for the fans is everything. If you can capitalize on someone having a good experience right after they leave a game with some opportunity that's coming from a sponsor, like, that's going to be the best time. And if you wait too long, or if you're too early, then you're going to miss it. And those are the most important things. I think that's when you make your win-win-win, is because then the fans get something out of it, and the sponsors get more out of it than they would have planned on when they get more fans engaging, and then the property gets, win-win-win.
Creed, you hit on something that is just absolutely frustrating. I never forget, like, after a Michigan football game, Tim Hortons will offer like a Michigan donut, but you wouldn't get that time. You wouldn't find out about that until the day later, and then you'd realize, oh, I forgot about my donut. Now I have a sweet tooth, so that always hurt. So it was I understand the frustration there, especially from the property side and from the brand side. But speaking of which, I wanted to ask both of you, you guys kind of touched on this a little bit, but we want to kind of take a deeper look into this. How does a team manage their sponsorships? And then how do the brands manage their sponsorships?
I can take this one, Creed. We've touched on this, a lot already, so it might be beating a dead horse here, but from a team standpoint, when you're managing a sponsorship, it becomes super fragmented, right? But we talk this way because we've lived it, and we see it, and obviously we feel Sponsor CX is a great solution for that, right? To be able to manage it, but they're managing emails, they're hopping on the phone with whoever their contact is at the brand, and going through their activation spreadsheet right? And going through it together, and but there's no transparency to that either. There's nothing to fall back on to look at, and there's no necessarily accountability that way. And so, and I think that's the property standpoint. From the brand side, and well, going back to the property side, the only accountability that's there is just any sort of mid-season or post-season like recap that they just say, this is what happened for you. And that becomes a challenge because you never really saw anything in between those two meetings, right? Besides what you may have seen when you go to one of the games. But on the brand side, it's similar. Managing a lot of it in some sort of there may be some sort of a software that's being used, like a Workfront or something that's a task management tool. You might have something like that on the brand side, but it's not really fit for the sponsorship industry, really. That's ever changing all the time. You may have some spreadsheets, you may have, you are still having those meetings. I know for me on the brand side, I loved having monthly meetings with all of my different properties so that we could get together and really hammer out and go through all of the assets that are in play right now. And do we need to make changes? Do we need to be nimble? Do we need to be agile in changing our messaging? What is our messaging? What are our goals? Because I think gone are the days of signing a contract, getting all the artwork and everything, putting it up, and not really working with your partners until, mid-season or even at the end of the season when it's time to renew the contract, right? There's got to be interaction back and forth, and that's where from a sponsor CX standpoint, on both the brand side and the property side, we don't want to take away from the interaction and that face-to-face, but have a platform that can always be ever present for there to be accountability, visibility, transparency of everything that's going on, to really see what's taking place throughout the whole year with it.
Yeah, Jason, you give examples of software like Workfront, or we talked about Basecamp, or you talk about graphic approvals and software and things like that. And so you give the example is, in order to do what you need to do in sponsorship, you got to pull together like 5 pieces of software that are like 747s, or you got to pull together 3, but with like 4 other small jets to combine it. And what I'm really curious about is, how do you approach, from a technical standpoint, building a software that fits the right user experience to just deliver what's just right for sponsorship?
I think in building products, that's always kind of the most, that's like the most important question, right? If you try to boil the ocean, you're going to fail, or you're going to try to, you're going to try to solve everyone's problems for everything. And I think that's one of the things one of the reasons I was most intrigued with Sponsor CX when Jason first told me about it is that, it's everyone right now is trying to use all of these solutions together simultaneously, like different things, and trying to smash them together to make a Frankenstein that, might help. But it often, like Frankenstein did, makes things worse. And so, I think we're really trying to build something that's very specific to selling and activating on sponsorships. And I think we're just trying to be as laser focused as we can on making that experience from start to finish be what we want it to be for sponsors. And I think that's why, like I said, one of the things that I liked the best is that we're just staying really focused and trying to just solve it the best we can. We've gotten a lot of validation from people in the industry. Jason's been in the industry for a long time, and we really feel like we've just nailed out like the most important things for brands and for properties to really communicate and execute on a sponsorship. And I think, like you said, technically, that's the challenge, is how do we make sure we just stay focused on that? But then how do we build it in a way that gives us flexibility into the future? flexibility to make API integrations so that we can build public APIs for other software to use us. Because we don't want to like try to take over everything. We want to do what's easiest and what's best. And for the software that's good, that really helps people, we want to provide integrations and provide ease of use to use your information and data that is within Sponsor CX to work with your data that you use in other places, and vice versa, to be able to pull things in. We want to be flexible in what we accept as data so that we can really show what users really want, and kind of give that flexibility. So it's been a little bit of that's been the challenging part on the architecture side, is really thinking about how can we solve the problems of now, but also leave ourselves a window or a door or something that we can walk through when we need to add some future functionality down the road.
And I've mentioned some other companies out there in the industry, tech companies that could make a lot of sense for us to be able to API into, because they're solid products and serve a purpose that maybe we're not necessarily going to totally get into, right? But they can help with the overall big picture of what a property or brand wants to do.
Yeah, those are all great points. One of the things I'm wondering about is kind of how if you were looking out, the next 5 to 10 years, and you talked about the importance of maintaining flexibility so you can adapt, but what are some of those trends that you see emerging in the future? What are some of the things that you see changing? We've talked about a lot of the changes that have already happened, but where do you see things going kind of from here?
I mean, on a technical side, I think there's such a big move towards platforms, trying to build things as a platform that's accessible to other software so that other people can use it. And I think that'll be one thing, like Jason said, we're really not gonna try to do everything. We want to try to do what we want to do really well, but then work well with other people, with other software and with other companies to really show things. So I think for me, it's really trying to maintain an open and transparent, open and transparent model going forward, so that we can share these things with other people, so that other people can use the information that we provide to better, activate, to better find sponsors and better work that way. So I think at a high level, maintaining flexibility so that we can work with the changes that are coming, all these I was just thinking, my brain was going crazy thinking about like watching the NBA and watching the NFL and baseball with no fans, and like thinking about, I was just sitting there watching. I'm like, there's still so much opportunity. I watch I watch a lot of baseball, but most of what I watch are these like condensed versions of the games that show up that the day after they condense all the games and do just like what happened. So that's like usually what I have time to watch. So I'll watch a full baseball game in 6 minutes. And, there's so many of these opportunities that people are using and interacting with, and there's no engagement. There's nothing that's, without those people being in the stands, there's this so much of what's missing. And I think we're going to see evolutions and how people try to use different means for activating on sponsorships. And I think the quicker that we can be adaptable and really show inside information into these newer types and different types of sponsorship, I think that's going to really, help push the sponsorship space forward and give so much more visibility for those smaller organizations or even the bigger organizations too.
I also think those were all amazing points, and I think the other is just data analytics, like we've talked about before. I think sponsorships are getting to be very expensive, and brands are going to be under the microscope of how am I managing? How is this going to deliver the return on investment that we need? Or just the return on the objective of whatever the sponsorship is there for. And so I think data is going to be big, and it's going to be one of those things that has to be looked at. And I think there's a huge opportunity in the sponsorship industry for analyzing data.
Sorry, just one other thing I wanted to add. I thought of this earlier, and then Jason just jogged my memory. I think one of the biggest things that changed how marketing and advertising works in the last 15 years was like Facebook ads. Facebook ads made it so people could run ads for like basically no money and target people very specifically, and they could see immediately who was engaging with and with the ads that were running. So you could spend very little and get lots of value. And I think part of Sponsor CX is going to make that possible, where we're really going to be able to see what types of sponsorships provide that, those differing value of impressions that Jason was talking about earlier. And we're going to be able to help work with people so that they can show like these, micro sponsorships in certain ways can get in front of the right people. And that really targeted, I think we're going to see a lot more of these like targeted sponsorships, where you're really, rather than just throwing up a sign on I-15 or whatever the interstate is in your regional area, you'll be able to really accurately target certain people and certain demographics with the sponsorships that will make sense and work there. And I think really trying to digitize and move the sponsorship industry forward will make those things possible.
Yeah, Creed, you make a really good point, and that is that it's the first time after social media was invented that sponsorship wasn't like a moded category in terms of the actual fans for that team. Because like you said, you could use tools like Facebook or Twitter to reach twinned or mirrored audiences. So I just wanted to reiterate that, because you made a really good point that I want our listeners to hear, is that, now you can reach the same audiences through other measurable means that are now competitive to sponsorships, which has made teams and brands have to be more competitive in order to compete with those other options. That was a really great point. Thank you for sharing that, Creed.
One thing you guys both alluded to, and I kind of want to kind of divert and ask this very important question, right? We've been in the new normal so long, it is now normal with all the things happening with the pandemic. And so in your world and in your experience, how have you seen COVID-19 impacting sponsorships on both the property side and the brand side? And where do you think that future is going? Will it go back to normal? Will everyone be adapting to what just happened moving forward?
Yeah, I think a lot of what you'll see is just it's going to change. It's going to have to. I think first of all, it starts with the agreements, looking at what a pandemic does to your sponsorship and how that adjusts it. So the agreements are going to have to be looked at from a force majeure standpoint of what that looks like with the pandemic, but. Let's just take face-to-face interactions for, that's totally going to be impacted. So if I'm doing event marketing and I've set up a booth, I'm going to go interact at a game. Let's just say there's fans there now, even if it's 50% capacity, there still could be an uncomfortableness of handing someone a flyer and having these, shaking their hand or whatever it may be. And so there needs to be some ways to be able to do that. I think technology, there's an opportunity there, right? To be able to create technology where you can still have a face-to-face interaction, but still have that engagement with them from a socially distanced way. I think you're going to see a lot of that start to change. I think from the standpoint of, I honestly do think we're going to have fans back. I think once we get, vaccines and other things back, we don't have these big, massive concrete structures to have nobody sitting in them. Like, we're going to figure that out as a society. It's going to happen. We'll probably just need to get through the election first here, but we'll get them back. Whatever that looks like, I do think that does lend to making sure that brands understand how they can maximize their goals or reach their goals with their sponsorships digitally with their partners. and we touched on that already a little bit from social media and other things, but there's going to have to be some ways to really structure that and look at ways to not just rely on the in-stadium experience, but even outside of the experience when maybe the game isn't going on. What can be done in order to use the partnership to achieve the goals and objectives?
Yeah, I think that kind of no matter what happens, I think sponsorships will continue to exist in some form or another. I think it's just such a valuable way for brands to really align their mission with certain events or sport teams or whatever, and reach people. And I think that this is a time, and you know, who knows, in 5 years we might even not even remember this. I doubt that'll happen, but that could, you know, that could happen. But I think more than likely times like this, you know, 2008, 2009, so these times that are of really of high uncertainty and where people pull their money close and they don't want to spend it and they're very careful, these are the times where the biggest innovation is going to come out of them. And I think the organizations and the sponsors who are most willing to innovate and to change and to look at sponsorships different and to, you know, try to evaluate them differently, but then also trust in their execution differently. I think those who are willing to innovate are going to be those who come out, you know, come out in spades after all of this is over, because I think it is going to change, and I think things are going to be so different. And I think that no matter what it looks like, the people who can change and who can and kind of anticipate that. And I'm hoping that I think Sponsor CX is going to give people a really good opportunity to do that and to really communicate and give insight. And I think that's going to be what allows people to move past old traditions and move into whatever the future holds of what sponsorships are.
Just really well said, Creed and Jason, and Mark, Jeff. Want to thank you both for your time and for our guests today. We have a tradition in how we end. So we'd like you to each just look right in the camera and just share your words of wisdom for young professionals or students in the industry right now, of what you have to leave them with. And we'll exit from there.
I think the only thing that I would have to say is that there's a lot to be gained from just going out and trying things. And that's how I've learned most everything that I've learned, is just going and trying and figuring things out. I think it applies both in technology and outside of technology. I'm always amazed that, you know, I get to write software and I really enjoy it and love it. But I also think that anyone can do something and anyone can build anything if they just start with an idea. The internet is a crazy place where you can start a business basically just by buying a domain name, and you can do everything else for zero costs, nothing. And all it is just a willingness to try and to learn and to fail lots of times. And I think that's it. Like, be willing to try and be willing to fail, because that's where you're going to learn. And that's like how you're going to get forward.
And I'll answer this by sharing how I got my start, and maybe can inspire some of the students there. When I was going to school, I didn't just all of a sudden get my job with the Jazz, right? I was in my intro to advertising class, and one of the executives came to speak in my class, and it just resonated with me. I'm like, sports and advertising, man, like I talked about, that's something I want to do. And all the other class members in there, they just got up and left afterwards. And I went straight to him and I said, I want to learn from you, and I want to work for you. Like, what can I do to learn? I'll do anything. And he handed me his card and he goes, give me a call in 2 weeks. And I kept that commitment. I said, I will, I'll call you. So I called him in 2 weeks, and he brought me in and we talked through everything. And he ended up hiring me as an intern. Now, my internship paid me $6 an hour, which basically paid for my gas from Provo up to Salt Lake for 43 home games, 2 preseasons and 41 home games. to go up there and pull on the AT&T shoot for loot onto the court and pull it off. But I had courtside seats that I could watch the game, and I observed and I watched and I learned at $6 an hour. And then after that year was up, it was my junior year, my senior year came up, and I said, I want to do it again. And so then they upped my pay to $8 an hour. And I had to I was still a full-time student. I still had to have another job to help me pay for school and other things. So I've got I'm a full-time student. I'm working part-time, selling, at the time I was selling newspaper ads. And then I was doing this internship to get the valuable experience that I need. And it was that experience and the relationships that I built with the executives there that actually got my job doing sponsorship sales at a young age, with people who are in their late 40s and 50s that have been doing this for years. And then I learned again with those people too. As I worked with them, I learned, and nothing's ever given to you. You have to work for it. You have to look for opportunities to insert yourself in, but do it with humility, with class, and just find ways to, don't just say, hey, I just want to work in sports. You go and you say, this is how I can help you. This is how I can help you achieve your goals. Let me get the experience, because I know these are the goals that I have for myself. And if you can provide value to somebody, that's when you can get your first start. And so, and the rest is history for me the rest of the way. And it's always been on my relationships that I've built. And as I've progressed in my career, that's how I've done it.
And that's a wrap. Join us next episode to talk data application with Nancy Hensley, Chief Product and Marketing Officer at Stats Perform.